Good evening. I'm speaking with Sharmini Ratwatte today, who is a difficult person to capture in any one mold. Sharmini, I think the best way to start would be to kind of continue the discussions we were having before we started shooting, and in a sense to speak about your time in Nigeria and how you came to come back to Sri Lanka and into the corporate world.
That's a very early start. Time in Nigeria was a factor because my dad worked there, and I was 5+ when I went in there. I left there when I was 21, and in between that time I had a 4-year period where I lived and studied in Sri Lanka and did the NCG.
There was still the NCG there.
That was, I was the first batch in the NCG. So it was very nice because I made very good friends there who I have continued to sort of be with and be quite close to. So when I came back from Nigeria at 21, I hadn't done Sri Lankan A-levels, so I couldn't get into university here. And although I had got university entrance to do architecture in Nigeria, we had decided to relocate here, so I was kind of left without a vocation, so to say. There was the only thing that was available for people at that time was accountancy, and I think people used to say that if you throw a stone when you walk on the street, you hit an accountant. So I was one of those those accountants.
But even then, I mean, were there more male accountants than female, or was it a new profession for
thinking back on the classes, I think there was a mix. I think now there is far more females that go into it, but I think there was a lot of my friends went in there. I think there were more men in the class.
And from accountancy to interior decor, I understand. Now, help us understand that.
Okay. Now, I went into a career accountancy, which in my mind was second best, or maybe third best, I don't know. I got this opportunity to work in an interior design and construction company as a management trainee, and management trainee doing accountancy. So I wasn't involved in the design or anything like that, but I was associated with a company that made beautiful things. So, and a company that I was proud to be, say that, oh, look at what they're doing. So that kind of gave me a lot of satisfaction. And what happened is, meaning I worked there for a total of 6 years, and with a period in between where I went somewhere else, which I'll tell you about. But I got involved in sort of looking at their drawings and helping do quotations and tender documents. So it sort of gave me an experience. And what I used to always tell all young accountants that are coming up, if you work for a small company, you get quite an all-round exposure. So that was the good part.
And that's also, in a sense, why I began where I began, because I wanted to get a sense of the grounding that you came from before. In a sense, you even began working with MS, which you worked for 18-20 years.
So I was at Saracen Interiors, which was a British collaboration with a Sri Lankan company. And it was very interesting because I was working with sort of very mature managers, and was working also with the shop floor because we had a factory. And we had carpenters, we had painters who we had to work with and interact with. So it was, when I think back on it, I think I learned quite a lot in that context. I also, in between that time when I finished my exams, I went and joined the Export Development Board, and I worked there as a project analyst for 1 year. And that was also very interesting because I saw a wide scope of different types of work, things at policy level, what the government did to support different industries in terms of handicrafts or pineapple cultivation or tea. And that gave me a different slant on what happened.
How was it like for the garment industry when you joined all those years ago? Was it embryonic? Was it just starting up? Or was it already mature as an industry in the country, bringing in foreign revenue?
Well, it was embryonic in a sense. There were big garment manufacturers at that time. But I was with one of the first companies which was a joint venture, and that was very unique. It was a joint venture with an American company, Mast Industries, and the nature of the joint venture was that they were 50-50, so nobody was really boss. So there was this whole atmosphere of working collaboratively, and that has a great influence on me when I think about it. You know, the way you approach problems is not that, you know, one person has to win, but, you know, you can come to a common understanding, and you have to be patient for the other person to come to your point of view. So that was the way business started, and it was embryonic in the sort of stage that we at MAS did a lot of firsts. We were the first company to have an air-conditioned factory, and that helped a lot in the working atmosphere. We had a lot of respect for people from shop floor level to the senior level. I was one of the first professionals to join MAS, and so I think because of that, you know, and a lot of others as we expanded joined on, and we were able to shape the company into something different.
I mean, this is not a question specific to MAS, but broadly speaking, for the entire industry, has the conditions for women at the shop floor level, and I'll come to the management level later on, has it improved? Because the Garments Without Guilt campaign, for example, suggests that it has, but if you take a look at the nutritional, the safety, the living conditions, the working environment, the remuneration, all of these things still pose some enduring challenges for the industry. So has it changed? Has it improved?
Meaning, when I look at the span of 20 years, I think you can say that there's a lot of improvement. First of all, in terms of the working conditions, because you have customers who are placing orders with you, they require certain safety standards and working conditions. Then we have minimum salary scales. So the things that have to be contributed by the company are taken care of. There's meals given, there are uniforms.
And this is not just on paper, it's actually happening.
It's actually happening. And also what happens is that when some of the bigger companies take it on, the customers expect it as a norm. So they start working with factories who do this, meaning obviously you get some who work with factories that probably do not meet these minimum standards. But by and large, I think over the 20 years you've seen improvement, so much so that, you know, people were able to be confident to go out and say garments without guilt. You know, you're not going to make a statement and say garments without guilt without being fairly confident that you're actually complying with all those levers, because the risk of non-compliance means that, you know, your credibility goes. So, meaning garments without guilt is not something that you could have done 15 years ago, certainly not even 10 years ago. And I think in terms of accommodation, etc., with the 200 factory program, where factories have gone out to the villages where people are able to live in their own homes, come to work, that has helped those communities.
There's been some improvement.
So
has there been a parallel improvement in, and this is the area which you're most passionate about, or at least speak the most about, or asked to speak the most about, in terms of the representation of women at the higher management level, in terms of the decision making, the board, the corporate level, you know, has there been improvement in that regard as well?
I would like to think yes, because
that's not an answer.
Okay, it's not an answer. I would say yes.
Okay.
I think there are more women CEOs now today than you would have seen 20 years ago. We've got Airtel, we've got Union Assurance, we've got Otara Gunawardena, we've got lots of people, meaning at the banks you see very senior leadership being handled by women. So I think there is an improvement. Whether there could be more is where we need to ask, why aren't there more? And then maybe address the issues that come up. And this is not a problem, Sanjana, that is only associated with Sri Lanka.
Sure.
It's a problem and an issue world over.
But is there in your experience,
yes,
are there things that a company can do to encourage, to instill that corporate culture that gives rise to more women,
yes,
and opportunities to them to come and rise up the corporate ladder? Because you have been very specific. You said that there is a glass ceiling.
Yeah. Yes, there is a glass ceiling. So let me just re-emphasize that. And why does that exist? Because I think management and corporates and the way they operate do not recognize the gender differences that women have to men. And we cannot measure them by the same yardstick. So sometimes if you measure a woman's performance by the same yardstick you do a man, it may not be the most appropriate, because there are events that happen in a woman's life which need her to take career breaks,